Greeting once again. We are here to continue with our topic. We started looking at report writing, and previous video we looked at the introduction to this topic, and we were able to look at what a report is, and we also looked at how to write a report, the main procedures in report writing. So in that video we are able to go up to the third step. So in this video we're going to look to start from the fourth and go through up to the last, and then we shall also be in position to start looking at the checklist of factors that you can use to evaluate the information source. As you're doing your research, you need to evaluate the source of information that you're getting the information from, because as we said in report writing, we use facts because that information can actually be used to make conclusions and recommendations. So meaning if it is not factual, then it can't serve the required purpose. So that's why you need to be sure of the source of information. So those are the things we want to look at in this video. So now to start with the fourth step, which is write a first draft. So having conducted your research and now you're in the final steps of your report writing, you come to the step of writing a first draft, and this is one of the most important stages of constructing a successful report. So the purpose of the first draft is not to write a perfect document, but rather to get all the main elements of the information out of your head and put it on paper. So you will have time to add to and edit this first attempt later on. So your primary goal is just to organize your data and analysis into a rough draft that will eventually become a final product. So while you're writing your first draft, you'll likely find gaps in your data or holes in your analysis. You'll find it to be lacking at certain stages or steps, but just make note of these and do not try to address every issue as you write. Instead, finish the draft and save the problem solving for when you begin the editing process. So that is it. So as you're writing your first draft, that's all you need to consider and put in action. The problem solving comes in later in the editing process. As you're editing your draft, those gaps and holes you found in your data and the analysis, you deal with them at that stage. So then the next step is analyze data and record findings. So having written your first draft, having made your research and collected the data, then you have to analyze the data, and after which you have to record the findings, because it is from the data that you come up with the findings after analyzing that data. So the focus of every report the focus of every report is the findings section, or the part where you present your interpretation of the data. So the findings is just your interpretation of the data. What are you getting from the data having interpreted it? So for an accountant, the findings could involve an explanation as to why a company's stock dropped during the previous quarter. And then for an environmental scientist, it could include a summary of an experiment on biodegradable plastics and how the result could affect waste management methods. So the findings section of your report should always provide valuable information related to the topic or issue you are addressing, even if the results are less than ideal. So if your final conclusion is that the data was insufficient for the research method, let's say the data was insufficient or the research method was flawed, then you should get a professional and accurate manner of explaining that. You need to, when we come to business communication or effective speaking, two people can say the same thing, they can say the same thing, but then the same thing gets a totally different response from the person they're talking to. So one may say it in a way that is professional, then the other one just says it directly. So you find that these two people get different responses. If it is unemployment, if it is in the employment environment, one may be fired and the other one may be given a chance. So depending on how you phrase your statements. So anyway, the better thing is to always avoid such things. And in our process, as we continue, we shall be seeing how to avoid having such cases whereby the research or the data collected during the research is insufficient. You get? So we shall be looking at that, how to avoid it. So then, having finished with this step of analyzing the data and then recording the findings, then you can go on from your findings, you can go on and recommend a course of action. So the other step, or the sixth step so far, is the recommend a course of action. That is the sixth step. So the final section of your report's body is your recommendation. After examining the data and analyzing any outcomes, you are qualified to present an idea as to what actions should be taken in response to your findings. So after reviewing the number of overtimes, let's say for example, having reviewed the number of overtimes that their team has been working, a project manager may recommend that an additional employee be added to the team. That is, having realized that from analyzing the fact that his group team members have been overworking, so he comes with the recommendation that they get another group member. Or for example, a surgeon might recommend that the hospital introduce new sterilization methods into the operating room after noting an increase in the preventable infections in the previous 6 months. So if you have presented your data well and shown your expertise, your reader is likely to trust your judgment. And then the seventh step is edit and distribute. So the final stage of writing a report is editing it thoroughly and distributing it to your audience. So you will need to edit for grammar mistakes, spelling errors and typos. You will also need to double check your data. Make sure your citations are correct and read over the entire document. Read over the entire document to make sure it presents cohesive narratives. If the report is going to be read by a wide audience, you may decide to ask someone else to proofread it or give you their opinion on the readability of the content. And then, so that is it all to do the editing, the procedures you can follow. And then when it comes to distributing the report, it may take different forms depending on your particular occupations. You might use an email to send it to your supervisor. You may present it verbally during a staff meeting or publish it in a professional journal, and so on and so forth. And regardless of how or where it is read, your goal is always to create a concise, informative, and effective document that will contribute to increased productivity in your workplace. So having looked at those steps of how to write a report, then we can go on and briefly go through the tips on the tips for writing a successful report. So some of the guides that you need when you're writing a report: one, first you need to know your audience. That is, before you begin writing, be sure you understand who the report is for, why they need the information, and what you want them to do after reading it. So knowing your audience will help you guide your style and ensure you communicate your information as efficient as possible. And then the other thing you need to know is you proofread carefully. So nothing ruins a quality report like a typo. Before you submit or present your report, be sure to proofread it carefully for any errors, because any errors in your report, they ruin its quality. Then the other thing is that be open to feedback. Depending on your job title, you may receive criticism or feedback on your reports, but try to remain receptive and open to critique. If you are willing to take feedback and implement your superior suggestions, your writing will likely improve as a result. And the other thing is that you would need to use your time wisely. Writing a quality report can take anywhere from a couple of hours to several weeks, and when it comes to research report, it can take more than that. But before you begin, be sure to budget your time and set a regular writing schedule. You may need also to set hourly or daily goals to ensure that your progress stays on track. So probably that's all about the tips on how to write a report. Now in this we are going to start on this new main topic, that is checklist of factors to use to evaluate the information source. So what you need to know is that there is a wide range and variety of information available on the internet, with a wide range of accuracy, reliability, and value. Unlike most traditional information sources like books and magazines, among others, no one has to evaluate or approve internet content before it is made public. Basically, anybody with a computer or a phone can post on the internet. So it is your job as a researcher, therefore, to evaluate what you locate, and in order to determine whether it suits your need. So it's all your task, because no one evaluates internet content before it is actually posted. So meaning that task is yours, unlike the traditional sources of information like books, whereby someone has to go through it before it is actually published. So these factors that you are going to look at include credibility, accuracy, reasonableness, and support. So we're going to look them in details and see how they can actually help you evaluate the source of information. So normally a few sources will meet every single criteria on this list, but if you learn how to use and apply these criteria, you will be better and in position to separate the high quality information from the poor quality information as you do your research. So first thing, you're going to look at credibility. So because people have always made important decisions based on information, evidence of authenticity and reliability, or credibility, or you may say believability, has always been important. So if you read an article saying that that the area where you live will experience a major earthquake in the next 6 months, it is important that you know whether or not to believe the information. So credibility is a measure of the authenticity or reliability of the source of information. So to determine the credibility of that source, you may need to ask yourself, why should I believe this source of information over another? And how does this source know this information? What is it about this source that makes it believable or not? So under those questions, how may you answer them? So we're going to look at the indicators of credibility, which can actually help you to answer such questions. So first among the indicators of credibility, we have two of them. The first one is the author's credentials. Like for example, when you see content posted on the internet, people provide their credentials. So you should look through and see whether the author is training and education, has training or education in a field relevant to the information they are publicizing. And then you also need to look for the author's degree or title or position of employment. So does the author provide contact information, let's say email address, phone number, and if the source of information is an organization or group, ask yourself if it is a respected body for you to trust that information. So all that is what can help you about the author. If the author's credentials give you a reason to believe the information, then you can believe it. And then the other thing, the other indicator of credibility is the evidence of quality control. Most scholarly information passes through a process of peer review, whereby several experts within that field of study review the author's writings to ensure that his or her conclusions are valid and keep with the current knowledge in that field. So then, journals of this type are known as academic, scholarly, or referred publications, and they are available both online and in print format. So information presented on an organizational website is also generally peer reviewed, since it is issued in the name of an organization. So they have to make sure that the information that they are publicizing is actually real, something like that. So that's what quality control looks at. Are there people to make sure that the quality of the content is that which is required, something like that. So that is those are the some indicators of credibility. And then likely also there are some indicators of possible lack of credibility. If you find that the author's credentials are not listed, like there is nothing about the author, then you should put a question mark on that information source. And then lack of quality control, like we've explained above. And then poor visual representation of information, like credible authors or websites present their information in a well organized and professional manner. So if a website's content is poorly designed and put together, then you can put a question mark on that source. So then the fourth indicator of lack of credibility is bad grammar and maybe misspelled words. So normally educated people use grammar fairly well and check their work for spelling errors. So an occasional error is not usual, but more than 2 or 3 spelling or grammar errors is a cause of caution, at least. Whether the errors are resulted from carelessness or ignorance, neither puts the information or the writer at a favorable light. So those are some of the indicators of credibility. So that is going to mark the end of this video. See you again in the next video when we shall be looking with the rest of the indicators of the rest of the factors that you can consider. The rest, that is accuracy, reasonableness, and support the remaining theory. See you then.